Hello and welcome to the Hoodcast. I am Aaron Hood, streaming live from the Hood compound in parts unknown, and I'm joined by my comedy sensei, my Mr. Miyagi, Nelson T. Gombakomba Jr.
Hello, Aaron. It's a pleasure to be on your podcast. Thank you very much.
I thought I'd add a bit of pep to your intro. I mean, not quite WWE promo, but
No, I quite liked it. I quite liked it. Comedy Sensei is a cool title, man. It's like I've been doing comedy so long that now I'm like an old monster. I'm like grasshopper. Put that punchline over there, you know.
you just sit in on the top of the castle on
Yeah.
Castle Mall, and people just impart wisdom, like you communicate only in scrolls usually.
That's what I do, man. Comedy sensei. Talking about that, I've actually been thinking during this whole podcast that I should do some sort of class on comedy, but I don't want to do what everyone else does and do the whole um make it or I don't even want to charge people for it. I just want to talk comedy, but then I need to work out the structure. I need to work out the topics and all that. But I'll let you know when it's ready. But yeah,
Yeah.
man, this is what I breathe. This is what I eat. This is my life.
How long have you been doing comedy?
I started in 2014, and it was in March. You went to the UEA, right?
Yes.
Do you know were they doing UEA's Got Talent when you were there?
Yes. Yeah.
So my first ever gig was UEA's Got Talent, but I didn't perform in the competition, right? I performed in the part between the last act and the judges announcing the results because I'd never done comedy before, and I didn't want to suck, so I told them, let me just go on after everyone else is gone, and that was the first ever gig. And from then on, I've never stopped it. From 2014, I've done it at least once every 2, 3 weeks in the slow time. So it's been a constant ever since.
Oh man, that's been great. And funny enough, you gave me my first non-organized by myself or in my hometown gig.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. And I remember not being very polished then because I was just starting out and very nervously talking about fake taxi for 5 minutes.
But what did I say to you afterwards? I did tell you that that was funny because it's not just in our like with comedy, right? A lot of us we already know what's funny, but it's more about convincing the rest of the world that okay, like we see it as funny. Now we have to convince other people that what we're saying is funny. So as long as you're saying something that's funny and I could relate to the material you were talking about, I could see the comedy in it. I could see potential. That's why I was like, definitely, man, you should come back and look at where you are now. you know.
Yeah, because I remember it was the first time I'd met you in person, and after my
Yeah.
set, you said something like, Sh- "Shake my hand, you strange individual."
No, do you know my first rule when it comes to comedy is that like they should not it should never be a question about ego. So when you see someone who's actually like doing it properly, then you have to like let them know or just encourage them. Because the way I look at comedy is there's people that go around calling themselves comedians, but true comedy is like it's hard to find. It's like a good song. There's hundreds of songs out there, but not all of them have that inspiration. So when you see someone who's actually trying to really go for it, or who's you have to encourage that, man. So like I'm not just a student of comedy. I'm a massive fan. This is my life, man.
Yeah, the people who do it tend to be really, really quite nerdy about it. And sometimes there's nothing worse than just performing to an audience which is just comedians, because you'll get very specific critiques
Yeah.
based on their preference.
And also sometimes when they when they don't understand, like I was at this competition, right, and this girl came on before me, and she did this thing in comedy that I'm like, I consider it one of the no goes. Or and like she was on stage, then she kept apologizing to the audience, as in, okay, I'm really sorry. Like she wasn't convincing in her
Oh no.
persona. And then after the show, right, everyone else was congratulating her, telling her she'd been fantastic. And I was like, okay, should I say something? So I was like, listen, I really loved what you did. You were fantastic and all that. But you shouldn't try to let the audience decide what is funny. You should do what you feel is funny. Like I was saying something along those lines, but giving her advice, right? The conversation quickly switched because I realized that she wasn't taking it well. She was just thinking like I was just some guy that came up after the show trying to, tell her how to do her job. So
Yeah.
when her ego got in the way, the message all got lost, and you know, there was no, she didn't learn anything in the end, and I bet she's still doing the same material. But my point is like, a lot of people don't really take criticism well as well. So when you do find someone who's actually interested and who's got the right mindset, then that's perfect. Can work.
Yeah. Because a lot of people, their ego gets in the way of them growing as a performer.
Yeah,
And if I imagine she when she was performing that stuff, she might have had a friendlier, more supportive audience. But then you go to like a pub in the middle of bumfuck nowhere,
that's the
Norfolk.
thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
because when I was watching that, right, like as well as I do, when some acts go on stage, the audience is laughing, but it's not that belly laugh. It's not that ha ha laugh. It's a different kind, like a sympathy laugh, like, oh, look at her. She's trying. Let's make her feel comfortable. And then the comedians then think that that's the appropriate response. When the appropriate response should be people falling off their chairs laughing or like
Yeah.
belly laughs and stuff. So I picked up on the fact that a lot of the laughter was from sympathy, but I didn't go that deep. I just said, listen, next time you're on stage, instead of apologizing every time you have to set up a joke, and instead of like telling the audience like I'm still a good person despite this fucked up thing I'm gonna say, just say it. That's what I was trying to tell her. But she's like, you know what? I don't know, man. I just do my thing. And these people don't have the mentality, man.
No.
They don't.
You
Comedy
have
is,
to you have to be you have to be unafraid to suck
yeah.
almost. You've got to have that bubble burst for you sometimes.
Mm.
And it's hard, but they're actually really important lessons to learn when you're just starting out.
Or
Uh,
let me tell you a good example where like I experienced that, right? And this is why I think you brought me on your podcast because I never run out of stuff. But anyway, let me tell you this, right? So I did this set at the comedy store, right? And I thought I had killed it. I left the stage thinking I had killed it. I thought I was like everything had just worked out. Then the boss set me down and was like, listen, people were laughing, you got a round of applause and everything, but for you to get progressed from a 10-minute set to a 20-minute set, then what you're saying in your 10-minute set has to kind of mean something. It has to have structure. And this is the comedy store, and these are like highly regarded. So in my head, I'm thinking this is the first time someone's ever given me proper feedback on material, on structure. On most comedy clubs don't care. Most promoters don't care. You can come, do your job, you go, they won't say anything. Everyone. But the comedy store set me down and they're like, hey man, listen, you were funny, but there's no structure. Like people need to not only laugh, but they need to know who you are. They need to get a backstory. They need to, and that's changed how I write jokes. It's changed how I've gone from telling 10 minutes worth of jokes to, I guess, making it all seem like a story. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's rather than an interesting like passage or page, you're like a fully fleshed out story or novel
Yeah.
now. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what they were saying to me, and I found out that that is actually so helpful. And till this day, that remains like one of the most important feedbacks I ever received. Because I also realized that no one really gives feedback on comedy, not proper feedback, you know.
Mm.
So when you actually get it, you have to listen, you have to take it into consideration.
It's nice to get something better than, oh, that was good, I enjoyed it, or, oh, that was shit, you were terrible, because you can't
Mm,
build anything with either of those responses.
no, you can't.
Yeah, and that's always struck to me that a lot of promoters are apathetic or polite at best, but
Mm,
you've always struck me as the kind of, when you wear your promoter hat and you're dealing with a lot of younger, newer local talents, that you're
yeah.
a bit more hands-on and proactive in terms of
I,
giving them feedback.
I feel that I feel like the most progress that I've ever made when it comes to comedy was from things that other people said. So feedback it's helped me a lot. So when I see, for example, a younger comedian on the circuit in Norwich, I try to just first of all, they need to believe that I'm simply saying this because I'm a fan of the craft. I'm not trying to like score cool points with anyone. And if you don't take my advice, it doesn't mean I can't book you or not. I'm just saying this because I literally think about this shit all the time. So when I see someone start comedy, right, like stage one, they're going through the first few gigs. I know how long it takes until they can get comfortable to a point where they can go on stage with 5 minutes of material and probably leave after 10 minutes. I know how to make them feel comfortable when it comes to freestyling. But these are also things that I've had to teach myself in a way. It's all based on experience. So when I do see someone starting out, I just try to give them pointers. And sometimes people don't get it because they don't really know like the reason why someone would come and give them feedback. They think there's an ulterior motive or agenda. But I'm actually such a big fan of comedy that I can sit down and just talk about it for God knows how long. So if people really want to listen, man, I can give tips. That's how I look at it.
And you've got to be willing to listen, but also simultaneously know who to listen to, because a
Mm,
lot of comics will, who are maybe embittered or not worth listening to, will give you very poor advice or say stuff about your
yeah,
prospects that would be really discouraging to a newbie.
that is true, man.
So
When it, yeah,
so
go on.
so how long have you been involved with Gonzo's, your comedy night?
So yeah, that was one of the first projects that I got involved in as a stand-up comedian. So they discovered me in quotes pretty early. A few months after I did UA's Got Talent as my first ever gig, that would have been March 2014. I did a few open mics between then and August, and I realized this one time that Gonzo's was doing an open mic, and I went there, and I remember the jokes I used to tell when I first started, and I just did the set that I wouldn't do now, but back then it worked, and then he just thought, hey man, you're really funny. What do you do? And I told them I was a student. And the boss was like, oh, students need jobs. Do you have a job? And I was like, no, really. And then I ended up working as a bar back at Gonzo's for like 3, 4 years just because I did that gig. And whilst I was working there, they let me run the comedy night as well. So it's like literally, it's been years, man, like five
So you
and a
just
half
fell
years.
into it quite casually, in
Yeah.
exactly the sort of way I would expect you to.
Just casually. I wasn't even looking for it because the thing is, when it first started, Gonzo's, man, it used to be so different from what it was. It used to be like 10, 15 audience members, and like eight of them would be coming, so performing on the night. It used to be that classic um stand like when a night starts out. But then because I grew with the night at this, like, how do I phrase this? Okay, so when I started running it, I was pretty new in comedy. So as you can expect, we weren't hitting good numbers then. But I started going outside of Norwich. I started um performing in London, Manchester, all these places because I literally just felt I had to, because Norwich, there was nothing. But then the more I traveled outside, the more I realized how a proper comedy night should be run. So I started taking these aspects from all these other comedy nights, added them to Gonzo's, and before we knew it, we were drawing bigger audiences because the quality of acts, the presentation, all of that got got better gradually.
And you just sort of learn on the job in that way. Like,
Literally, man, I literally just started learning on the job. I never really had a mentor or anything. The closest I've ever, I've never even had, I just watch a lot of comedy and then try to decipher what the person's trying to say. And then I think when I first started, I wrote down 10 comedians that I really looked up to and looked at their best work and started picking up patterns. And I started working out how to write a set, all these things. And get this, Aaron, when I was running Gonzo's, I had to perform new material almost every month. And as a new comedian, you don't even have material, but now you're expected to do new material, all these things. So because I put myself in a in an environment where I constantly had to produce material, I found that that really benefited me because you know,
you had
I,
to actually sit down and write.
yeah, you had to. I felt like when the whole show depends on not so much you, but like if you are the face of the show, if you've promoted and invited all these people to your show and you suck, you can only get away with that once or twice. If
Before
you keep
people stay gone.
so I felt I had to push myself to a point where I was constantly dishing out good performances. And, I got to a level where like I could just about do a new 5 minute show a month. And then I'd add a bit of crowd work to make it like 10, 15. And then because I kept on forcing myself to go on stage even when I had no material, I started gaining this confidence in just what I did. And this is it's more the mindset really, rather than the material that that was that I feel like would be the biggest benefit of running Gonzos. Because when you're forced to do something like that, and when you constantly have to do it. And if you do get it right by some miracle, you start thinking, oh man, maybe I actually can do it. So it built up a confidence in me that allowed me to go to like all these places and just perform like I own the place and just and here I am today, Aaron.
Eh, What benefited me was when I started the Hood Nanny, which
Mm,
I was just about to relaunch before this all happened.
yeah,
Uh, that I started it off in the rehearsal rooms in Bury St Edmunds, and like
yeah.
about 15, 20 of my mates would turn up, and then we
Mhm.
gradually it moved to a bigger venue where I could actually charge, and
Yeah,
we had room and stuff. But I sort of missed how cramped and punk and sort of open micy the original was, and it never
yeah,
really, apart from two really good shows, one where I dressed as Julius Caesar and the comics assassinated me at the end of the
yeah.
night. I remember, I think it was Bimmy or Alex Green threw a table on my head. It was fantastic.
Damn. Okay, all right.
I had
That's all.
like a big sack full of red fake blood mixed
Yeah,
with like cocoa and red watercoloring, like duct taped to my torso, and I just
yeah.
squeezed it out all over the floor after I'd been
Oh my
st-
God.
yeah.
And I bet the audience loved that.
Yeah, it was crazy. Everyone was just like, "What the fuck?" And a few of the audience members asked really passionately to rip the duct tape off of my chest and belly, which was absolutely astronomical.
But
Yeah,
see, when you do stuff like that, when you do finish nights like that, and when you do go home, you just think, I created all that. I put all that together
yeah.
and it worked out. And the more you get it right, the more ambitious you get. You
Me and
start trying to
Flora,
move.
when we had these ideas and executed them, it made for a really special show, and that's one of the things I missed about it. But I wanted to kind of bring it back. But we're only going to do it quarterly from now on, so we can put like our effort into making these really big quality shows without getting
Yeah,
burnt out.
yeah, no, definitely. I definitely understand that because also you can't really you don't want to rush too much, man. Patience is also a really crucial ingredient in all of this. A lot of comedy stuff, like the best stuff, the best shows, all these things, it takes time to grow, man. The audiences, the brands, everything. A lot of the people that try to take shortcuts don't really last. There's
Yeah.
comedy nights that have been open, I mean, all over the place, but they don't last. It's because people people need to know that when they start a comedy night, you need structure. You need to know which acts you're gonna have on. You need to know the frequency because that affects a lot of the quality as well. You need to know the venue, all these extra things. So makes sense, man.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff has to happen organically, and if you try and force it, it's sort of like astroturf, like a structure and a
Yeah,
fan base. It's not gonna take hold, and you'll eventually like be completely unmotivated to do it, and it will
yeah.
just fold. Like bring it back to that gig, um, where what my I lost my safety pin for the toga before I put the blood pack on and stuff. So it kept
Yeah.
falling down when I was trying to MC. So eventually I got so tired of it, I just threw the toga off and did the rest of the set in my pants. And
Oh my God.
it's just stuff like that you're trying to develop a kind of relationship with the audience. And
Yeah.
if you have go in there being strong-willed and have very little inhibitions, and if you present to the audience like you don't give a fuck, it it usually goes over fairly well, I've found.
Yeah, yeah. Now, like people relate there's a bit of honesty that at the end of the day, that what the artist and his audience have to have. You have to kind of have a genuine relationship where you both don't feel like you're cheating each other. So I feel like if I'm in an audience of a comedy show, right, I shouldn't beat the comedian to his punchlines. There's little things that I should
Yeah,
that I should always think like, okay, now that I'm in the audience, this guy's job is to be funny. I shouldn't beat him to his punchlines. He should make me laugh and set it up. We have this agreement. Now, if the comedian lives up to that, that means that I'm gonna come back. I've enjoyed my show. A lot of the time, people they don't think that deep into it, man. They just think it's a matter of setting up a comedy night and then paying off a headliner, then doing it again next month, putting up flyers. No, it's a very slow process that requires you to have a relationship with your audience, and you gotta trust each other as well.
Yeah, you've got to have that kind of consent and awareness and trust. Like like you can't have certain point like rough sex is fine, but if you push someone too hard, that's a crime. And
Yeah,
it's not exactly the same with comedy, but I feel like the parallels
oh
track a bit.
yeah. Now it makes perfect sense though, because you don't want to piss your audience off. You don't ever want people to get to a point where they're like, yo man, you know what? We'll just come back after the comedy is done. When they would rather go to the pub next door, sit and chat with their friends instead
Yeah,
of coming to see you. Yeah, nah.
just to, just complaining like, oh, there used to be a pool table in here, or
Nah. You don't want that. You want people who can't wait to see you. So these are just some of the things that I've realized. But like the things that we've discussed, it's mostly to do with just being, uh, uh, I guess, an observant person and working well with people. And it's not so much like, of course, the material still needs to be good, but I think at the heart of it all, I've noticed that the best comedy nights are run by decent people. I'm not gonna say good, amazing people, but I'm gonna say like decent people. I've been to some comedy clubs in London, man, and the promoter is probably they pissed me off for one reason or the other, and I've just thought, man, I cannot be bothered to get to come back here again. Those type of things. So
some promoters are like staggeringly sleazy, like they're a self parody of like the way.
yeah, the classic promoter stereotype is about like there's someone who's failed to make it in comedy now, like they're promoting, and they tend to be really bitter and rude. And I hate working with those type of people.
Yeah, especially when they still, to save money, deem to be MCs.
Yeah. Oh
Because
my God, London is filled with those, man. If you
oh
ever, if you ever see someone, okay, maybe this is a podcast and people are gonna listen back and try to start gossip, but I'm gonna say it anyway, right? If you see someone, this is a classic case in London. A lot of them, they have their gigs, just like you and I do in Norfolk. But we go to other places so that we can really say, okay, I don't just perform in one place, right? These comedians literally just get a venue and they'll MC it for years, years, and years without any development whatsoever. And
they
I
literally
feel,
just do that gig every month.
I'm like, how can you call yourself a comedian, man? And they get beaten because of that. And they take it out on newbies or guys like you and I who are just trying to like put two and two together. But I
Yeah.
feel like a lot of the resentment from like so-called MCs and promoters. It's literally guys who failed at comedy, who perform at one venue literally every time, then they MC and then they expect to progress after such a shitty structure.
Yeah,
It's not gonna happen.
it's kind of the difference between being sort of like a traveling merchant like you and I are,
Yeah,
or just carving out your own sort of little fiefdom
yeah,
that you control entirely. And it also tends to be the people that have failed in the industry either through
yeah.
sometimes it can be dumb luck or missed opportunities, or sometimes they're just shit. Like you see them the way they perform now, and it's not overly surprising that they're still performing to the same
Yeah,
five middle-aged men, fused to the bar stools, and like a dog that you don't know if it's dead or not. Those
bro.
sort of
I've just sent you something on Facebook because I don't want to say the name out on your podcast, but there's a that club that I've just sent you, right? The guy who MCs that club, he is probably he's one of the worst MCs that I've seen. Aaron. Hand on heart. Hand on heart. Like, when a comedian does jokes that are so bad that even audience members start picking up on the fact that maybe this is not the guy we came to see. You know, I, I went to that club that I've just sent you a few months ago, right? This guy not only made, I wouldn't say he rape jokes or anything, but like he was so awful, just so bad. And then I found out that he's been doing comedy for like 10 plus years. And I was like, where the hell is he performing? And then turns
Where have
out,
those years gone?
turns out he just performs in his own venue. I was like, no wonder why these people suck, because it's just they're not doing it the right way. That's basically what it comes down to.
Or they've done a course
Well,
and they think they've done a course and they think they're automatically an expert on comedy and they won't shut up about the person whose course that they've done.
let me tell you something about courses, Aaron. The
Please
best
do.
course is just to do it. And I know that sounds, like some sensei type of shit, but like a lot of the courses that I've seen, right? The best book that I've seen is one called Mastering Stand Up. Have you seen that?
No, I've never seen it. I don't really pay attention to courses or anything very much.
That's good. That's good because I'm the same way. I never like paid. I've never done a course. The only two things that I've ever did that are close to courses was there was an afternoon where I went to the comedy store in London because they have like a writing session. And I only did that because they had told me that I need to work on my structure. So I was like, you know what? Let me go see what this is about. But apart from that, the only book that I've read on comedy is called Mastering Stand Up. And because all of these other courses, I'm like, what exactly are you teaching people? Comedy is a spiritual thing, man. Like, I always have this example, right? If Bob Marley applied for music school, he'll probably not even get in. The guy spoke broke English, you know. He didn't, he was out of tune, but he is still Bob Marley. There's certain things that like you cannot teach, like moving into comedy. Like, what exactly are you going to be teaching people? If you can make that make sense to me, then I will like, support the course. But I'm here to see one way it really like breaks down what it's like to be a comedian, what it's like to travel crazy hours at night, go to a show where the audience is there for a different reason other than comedy and still be expected to be
To do
funny.
well.
No course teaches you that.
Yeah. It
Mm.
won't also be able to deal with the mental health side effects
Yeah.
or the easy access to substances,
Yeah.
how to deal with dodgy promoters or
How,
knowing your rights or what not to accept.
you know,
That would be useful. But really, it seems kind of no disrespect to anyone who does a course or anyone who
yeah.
will do it. And what
Mm,
a very successful comedian, I can't say his name on the podcast, but I'll text you it.
mm,
Um, said that a lot of the people, it's adding all the bureaucracy and infrastructure that you try and get away from as a comedian.
yeah.
And also, a lot of the only people who are qualified to teach comedy are making so much money that it's not worth their time to do.
Yeah. That is so true, man. Like, it's weirdly simple, man, but it's also complicated at the same time. If you're out here looking for shortcuts to comedy, you're gonna you're gonna be very depressed because the only shortcut is that you have to go on that stage and then tell those jokes. There's no other shortcuts. If you expect some course that's gonna speed up your career by 5 years, then there's no such thing. There's no such thing, man. Like
And
sometimes when I'm on the stage and I'm sharing it with like someone that I look up to, I always ask them like, "Hey, man, I'm a new comedian. Is there any word of advice that you'd like to give to me so that And I do that because I feel that they can always, if someone is headlining a show, you can always learn something from them because they've clearly done something right. They may not
yeah,
be amazing, but they've done something right. And some of them have said really, really helpful things to me, man. And it's these little tiny bits of information that prove very helpful at the end. Like, for example, there's this guy that told me that in when it comes to progression, instead of doing like, okay, let's say you're doing a 10-minute set, right? Instead of doing a really good 5-minute set and then adding the 5 minutes, the rest of the 5 minutes putting feelers, you say that you should only start, progressing when you're constantly destroying shows. You constantly, like, your ratio is like 10 to only, like, for every 10 shows, let's say only one is mediocre. Like, that's the level you should aim for. You should aim for constant perfection. Constantly try to, because the reason I say this, because if you do progress and you get to a point where you're now touring, you're going to be doing way more dates and way more shows than an open micer could possibly ever wish for. So if you ever find yourself in a position where you're doing, let's say, 4 20-minute sets a week, then you have to make sure you kill all of those four. You
Yeah,
can't leave anything to destiny. So because that's the level that I'm trying to push myself to get, where like every show is almost perfect, then there's no shortcuts, man. It's brutal because it also relies on you being brutally honest with yourself. You can't just take shortcuts. If something is not funny, take it out your set. Don't try to like defeat or polish something that cannot be polished. Like, if it's not working, it's not. Aim
yeah,
for A-class material.
yeah. Don't bother trying to paint the walls if the house is on fucking fire.
Amen. Amen. I was gonna use a different saying, but I don't know if I should be swearing too much.
It's fine. This is not a family podcast. You know, I haven't. We haven't exactly done a monologue about anal fisting, so I'm sure we're fine.
Nah. When are we gonna get to that, Aaron? Yeah, I've been on your podcast 37 years now. We haven't even talked about anal fisting.
What are your views, Nelson? Are you for or are you against?
I feel like it's something that you can only do to someone you care about. You shouldn't just be going around fisting random people or letting random people fist you. I think I think it's a relationship milestone more than anything. You
Yeah.
shouldn't.
Also, the I premise of random fisting random people implies that it's a spontaneous act, and I imagine because of the precision and the risk, you need quite a lot of prep and planning and care put into
Oh,
that activity.
definitely, definitely. I feel like there's an activity where you may also need a third party in case things go wrong.
It's like a
Somewhere,
referee.
like a referee, like, okay, that's enough hand. That's too much hand. That's enough. That's beyond the elbow now.
He just draws like a line on your arm with a bit of sharpie.
Like,
You're not allowed to go any deeper than that.
I'm sorry, Mr. Hood. That arm is that's too much
Offside. Offside.
offside. Like, baby, that's too much arm. You know, too much.
With this kind of genius and accessible riffing, it's no wonder that you got a TED talk, is it, man?
Do you know what? Right, that that well, okay. If you've ever watched it, the truth is that I didn't plan too much when I did that because at the end of the day, Aaron, when you do this comedy shit, man, sometimes it's like, what do I even talk about? This constantly, we're constantly questioning so much about the acts, the material. So when I did that, like, I was actually so nervous, and there were, I think, 10 other talks on that day in total. So I just did mine so that I wouldn't bomb on that stage. But the fact that they ended up picking it up at the end, I was like, oh, good, it actually worked out. But I didn't really think it was gonna be made. It was gonna go to the actual platform because What do we even talk about, man? It's hard.
Yeah. I remember watching it, and you were trying to do material as normal, but the attendees were very sort of well-to-do and polite,
That's the thing. It's like, do you know
and
what?
like you were getting nothing. And I just saw that look in your face where you were just like, "Oh shit, they're here for intellectualism."
I was like, oh shit, they're actually here for like serious talks, and no one cares about me swimming from Africa to Great Yarmouth. What the fuck, you know? But yeah, man, like I feel like comedy should be fun. You know, I hate people that try to constantly put rules on it, or like, oh, material should be clean, should be this and that. Or like another issue that I'm always arguing with people in my personal life is like offensive humor, because sometimes I'm always thinking like everything should be criticized, everything Christianity, like literally, if you can make it funny, you shouldn't be afraid. You know, you should just go for it.
Yeah,
And because I'm constantly going for that sort of material, sometimes I'm always thinking, damn, man, is this too much? But you have to stay true to thyself, man.
you
You have to,
do. And also, what is offensive is relative to whatever fucking room you're in.
yeah. Like, I'm offended by a bad joke more than anything. A
Yeah,
joke where I feel like, wait a minute, he didn't even try to put some misdirection. He didn't even try to like, you know,
there's no punchline in it.
there's no
It's like,
punchline. He
and the
wanted
setup lasted 2 minutes and then
nah,
just drifted off somewhere.
that offends me, man. I would stand up and leave. Like, what type of comedy is this where none of you are really trying?
I know it's like watching someone take a dump on someone you really love.
Bro. Yo, Aaron, where did you actually start? Like, what year was it?
Well, I did my first ever gig when I was 14.
Mm,
But I don't really count those because it would be like to a party, a house party,
yeah, yeah.
like like one at the village hall where I got paid 50 quid for when I was 16. I
Oh,
was like,
that's a good.
I
That's
thought that was just normal. How wrong was I? But then I just would appear at loads of people's parties and stuff
yeah.
and be really, really terrible at local open mics until I just started doing my own night and
Mm,
doing this regular residency at an open mic night where they seemed to accept my humor. So I
yeah.
didn't properly start comedy until I was about 20, 21, and I'm 24 now.
Nah, all right. That's good. Because you know, when I first started in Norwich, man, the scene was slightly different. I mean, I can't even really name names, obviously, but like we used to have, you know, them type of nights where like I'd go to the birdcage and there'd be about 8 local comedians, some maybe still active, and of those 8 comedians, like because it's the birdcage, and the birdcage has always been rather loose, right? Like of those 8 comedians, let's say 2 or 3 would be taking it seriously. The
Yeah,
rest just seemed to just go on stage and like, okay, I guess I gotta be funny now. It was just that type of humor where it was like literally only 3 out of the 8 guys would be attempting to actually make people laugh. The rest were like weird performance pieces. I remember taking my cousin once there, and he was like, "Man, you know what? I need to be properly high to get some of those other dudes because out of the 10 people, only like 2 or 3 were really doing what we know as comedy. The rest were just doing that sort of open mic shit that you and I both know. Like
doing
go,
weird kind of monologues about
yeah,
something.
reading a page from a book. Oh, dude, that's
I never get gigs at the Birdcage. I mean, when it was under old management, but I performed there when I sucked. But
yeah.
uh, the set the I emailed so many fucking times to the bloke when they were offering slots, and they just
Mhm.
would not fucking even respond to me. It's just
Man,
like, dude, this is meant to be an alternative comedy night. I'm
well,
about as alternative as you're gonna fucking get here.
you didn't get it, Aaron. The alternative part was not so much the comedy. It was like, we will still call it comedy, but you don't need to laugh. It's that type of comedy. That's,
It's not alternative comedy. It's an alternative to comedy.
it's an alternative to comedy. It's like it's like some weird attention pieces. But like, yeah, the birdcage, man, it's all cool. It's just that like people need structure, man. And also, if you're gonna do these nights, they need to be done. Okay. Look at it from the customer's perspective. If someone is spending £5 or £3, which is normally the price for these comedy nights, right? And if they pay £5, and if they go to that comedy night, and 7 of those 10 guys are just doing some weird stuff, and they don't even like that person's not gonna come back because laughing, like only 3 out of 10 make you laugh, then that's not a
What the
good
fuck was
comedy.
the point?
You know what I'm saying? So it's all these other things, like whoever runs these clubs needs to factor all these other things, because I feel like it helps not just the comedy night grow, but the local talent grow. And the more the local talent grow, the bigger the audience, because everyone's going to be inviting everyone,
Yeah,
and it has such a good ripple effect on everything that it's like, that's why I always feel like you never lose anything from investing in local talent, giving feedback, making sure people get better. Because imagine if Norwich produced, I don't know, headliners, and we would all just go to London one weekend, Manchester, all these places with guaranteed gigs. That would be so cool. But there's not enough of that now. Like
yeah,
in Norwich, it's only a handful, and there's only a handful that take it seriously. So the more
yeah.
people take it seriously, the bigger the scene's gonna get.
It gets kind of. I dislike gatekeeping, but it does hard it does make me angry to see people just kind of pissing about, or like a lot of headline acts being headline spots locally being kind of homogenized, and then knowing that you're good enough to do those spots but not necessarily getting the opportunity.
Yeah, no, that is so true. And also, like what you're saying is right. With the Norwich gigs, like right now, how many Norwich gigs are there? There's Gonzo's, there's Martin Westgate's Humor, there's you haven't set yours up just yet, have you? Are you
Yeah,
not
it's
Norwich?
coming back again, but yeah, mine, there's Rory's, and there's Khan's one at
There's
Walnut Tree.
Khan, yeah, and that's 5. And then there's Alex Oliver, who does mm, think it's 1 or 2 venues, but see, we have less than we have about 6 or 7 promoters in the whole city. You could even go so far as to say Norfolk. It's not a big place, so like there's so much opportunity for someone to get better, but also I see where you're coming from. That the same work shouldn't go to the same people. It should be more diversity. But then again, we need that talent to come up, people that can genuinely close these shows and then leave the audience wanting more.
Yeah, it appears that you kind of reach a sort of ceiling in Norwich, and then you maybe have to start working on a show and touring that, or then start hitting London and the other bigger
Yeah,
cities to get those club spots. Because I don't know if you've experienced this, but there seems to be a lot of shine on acts who've done London and made it in
yeah,
London
yeah,
compared to other acts, and then a lot of acts come out of London, the London city limits, with an overinflated sense of self-worth or
yeah.
reputation, and often are some are really really good, don't get me wrong, but others just aren't up to snuff.
Okay, let me start with the London, with the point about the London X, right? I feel like a lot of them, when they come to Norwich, they don't like, let's say, Gonzo's comedy night and stuff. Like, I still expect as good a 20-minute set as you can do in let's say the comedy store at Top Secret Club. I still expect that level of brilliance. If you come to Norwich and you give me something substandard, I'm gonna pick up on it and I'm never gonna book you again because I know you've just give me some substandard work because you thought, oh, I'm in Norwich, this doesn't matter.
It doesn't
So
matter, you can burn that. Their mindset is
yeah,
if they burn a couple bridges, they might use you to just work out new material or for an
yeah.
easy bit of money.
See, I pick up on that. I mean, I'm sure you can as well. Like when someone
Yes,
is to shortchange me, like I know a good set. I mean, like I may not be, able to produce the best set in the world, but you and I, you can tell when someone's done a B set or an A plus set. So if you've advertised yourself as this great clothes and you come and you give me a mediocre job, I'm probably not gonna book you again. But so that's like my issue with London X, the fact that they can come they can come from outside of London and then look at our venues that we've worked hard to establish as if they're inferior and not do a job as good. And I hate that when that happens. But when someone actually comes from London who's doing like let's say 10, 15 minute spots in London. And if you give them the first 20-minute spot in Norwich, which I've done a few times, those type of guys tend to appreciate it a lot more because they've realized that whilst they cannot necessarily get a 20-minute in London just yet, they are now being offered an opportunity to do so outside. And if they do it well, they can then come and do it again over and over again. And now they can start applying to places saying I do 20-minute spots, but it can benefit them if they do it the right way. It's all just about performing at your best and respecting the venue that's giving you a chance as well.
yeah. I think that like a lot of promising acts messaged me when I was running the Hood and Annie when we were
Mm,
usually charging, but would actually come get a first time and then again, or take a paid open spot the second time, or come back again and do new
mm.
material, and keep coming back because they are guaranteed an audience and a
Yeah.
good warm reception. So reputation as currency does translate into a better standard of act.
Yes. So if they see that, then that's good. Those are the type of London acts that I really like working with. The people that see our clubs, the Norfolk clubs that we've worked so hard to establish, the people that give them the respect that they deserve always tend to do better and always tend to progress. I had a guy a few months ago. I don't know if that was the same Gonzos you did, Joe Hobbs. Was it the same night you were on?
I don't remember Joe Hobbs. I think I was on with a guy called Darren,
Yeah,
you, uh,
yeah,
Kira, and Chris Norton Walker and Josh
yeah.
Ryan. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's a different set. Okay, so before that, I had a guy called Joe Hobbs come on, and he's a up and coming act in London. He's doing 10, 15, 20 minute spots, and he's progressing. And when he actually got to Gonzo's, not only was he happy to headline, he killed it, and the audience asked for more. And I was like, this is why I do it. This is a perfect night. As opposed to someone who doesn't even like. Because me and Alex Oliver, we talk about the show as soon as it's done, and a lot of these guys don't know how much they ruin just by giving us mediocre sets. And sometimes London X can do a 10-minute spot in London and think that that means they can now do a 20-minute set in Norwich, which is not even the same thing.
No.
Because now your 20 minute set in Norwich is just going to be your good 10 minutes plus another 10 minutes worth of failures, which I don't accept because we all know it's not the same thing.
No, it isn't. And you just snuff those out. You sniff those out, and then you respond accordingly.
Yeah. I was gonna say, you did bring up an interesting point earlier about how in Norwich it seems as if you have to go outside to gain more respect. And I know why that is. It's because when I first started, right, around 2004, there were literally like right now there's seven promoters, six that we've named. We'll just say seven in case we miss one out, or if you want to include red card, But really there's a handful of promoters, and it was even worse when I first started. So um there's no choice but to go outside. There's no choice but to try all these because you then it helps the comedian develop. Now if you want to stay in Norwich and not necessarily travel, then you have to be performing just as good as those that are traveling, like it has
Yes.
to be it has to be relative. Like if you've chosen to just stay in Norwich, then you also have to understand that you're missing out on the experience that you would gain from traveling. So that means that you should write more, or find a way to make up for that discrepancy, because where when the audience is watching a comedy show, they don't care about who's from London, who's from. They just want funny. Okay,
Yeah.
so if the audience doesn't pick up on the fact that you're a lazy comic who doesn't like traveling, and if they're still laughing, then I feel like that's good. Whatever you do, as long as people are laughing, then as long as it's working for you,
Yeah.
that's good.
So
I've,
we're just about coming up to the hour mark.
yeah.
I just wanted to fit one more question, and then we'll do the closing segment.
Mhm.
We've briefly touched on it, and I know we can't name names or anything, but one of the most useful bits of a course or anything would be how to circumnavigate or deal with dodgy promoters. Not necessarily bad promoters, because sometimes you know everyone deals with people like maybe the gigs weren't
Yeah,
promoted well or whatever, but
yeah.
just dodgy promoters who won't pay or will take advantage of you in a number of ways. Do you have any advice or ways that you tend to deal with promoters like that?
Well, when it comes to business, I normally I'm like dodgy promoters. Okay, a dodgy promoter, let's say someone that tries to con you out of money, right? Someone that tries to shortchange you. I haven't I've had late payments, but I feel like I've chased up all the payments and they've been paid up. Some have taken a lot longer than I wanted to, but eventually they got paid up. I think promoters at the end of the day get scared when you threaten to expose them. Because just picture this, if I travel to London, especially on a weekday when I really don't need to travel, if I go to your gig on a weekday and that ends up costing me, let's say, £50, and you refuse to pay me that, I'm gonna be pissed off, and I'm gonna go straight to Facebook Comedy Collective or Facebook Comedy Forum and drag your name to the death. Because once you screw someone over like that, for me personally, I'm ready to take it all the way. So I haven't had to deal with any promoter who's been dodgy, because I am ready to expose them and to make sure that they don't do it to another person. However, I've also heard of those type of stories where someone will book you for, let's say, £100, but then when you turn up to the gig, they're like 80, which is just unacceptable.
The
So
fee is the fee.
yeah, I would threaten to expose. I'll be like, I'll be like a whistleblower, man. If I st In fact, it's really hard to con comedians, because a lot of us now understand the value of reputation. And if you are ready to risk your reputation by screwing someone over, then get ready to have the same sort of energy come back to you, because I'm gonna report, I'm gonna let everyone know, and I'm gonna make sure you won't be able to finesse anyone else outside of
But
the
to book any new acts or anything,
yeah,
because if they've done it to you, they've probably already done it. It's not
definitely,
really.
man. Oh my God. Like the guy that I messaged you about earlier, he's known for that. He's known for shortchanging people. You go to his gig, it's like, oh shit, less people turned up, so are you happy to take less pay? Which is not even acceptable. So
No.
it happens. But I feel like exposure is always the greatest weapon because people are scared of that. Reputation is everything in this game. So once you have a reputation of not paying acts, people are not gonna, people are gonna stop applying to your gigs. People are gonna, your gig is just gonna die out. So anytime you experience that, threaten their reputation.
Yeah,
And,
because
and when,
on the comedy forums, you
mm,
see this happen, and I know about promoters in Sunderland, even though I've never set foot in the city,
yeah,
who's notorious for ripping people off. And I just thought, all right, I'll make a note of that. If I ever got to that stage, don't do his gig. You know?
don't. And that is so effective because the comedy world is not really big, in terms of everyone else that I mean, it's really hard to put a number to it, but like if your name is ruined, the name it can spread through the country pretty quickly. Those groups are very active, you know, like
Yeah.
those Facebook comedy forums. Those if your reputation is ruined, people are gonna like they will know you will pay your dues.
All right, man. So we'll sunlight is the best disinfectant in terms of these promoters, and they will be rooted out
Yes, indeed.
eventually. They will be purged. I like to end my podcast by giving my guests like the last word. And it can be like a story or an anecdote or a plug or whatever you want to say. So, Nelson T. Gombakomba Jr., what is your last word?
Oh man, see, I actually was so excited to get interviewed that I didn't even think about um, what I was gonna say too much. But how about you tell me something interesting about you, Aaron? Huh? How about that? You're always interviewing people. How about how about today? You give the last word, and I'll give the last word on top of your last word. Tell me something interesting about you, man.
All right.
We've never actually sat down and had a drink.
No, we haven't, man. We'll have to do that. Maybe a virtual Skype session, drinking session.
Whilst watching fake text in the day.
Nationalize the bang bus.
You gotta do it.
All right. I've got a few stories. There's a time where I fractured my arm at Play World. It was on this inflatable slide, and I landed directly on my arm, and like my head crunched into it. I had a snap, and I came back to my mum and showed her my hand, but I wasn't like crying or anything, and my arm was like at an angle. I just turned green, and I was like, "Mum, I think there's something wrong with my arm." But
Yo.
a better story would be have you seen the Harry Potter movies?
Yeah, yeah, seen them.
The second one, Chamber of Secrets, when the basilisk comes out to try and eat our boy Harry.
Yeah.
Uh, I jump up on my seat and I start yelling at the screen in parcel tongue. You know that fake snake language.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Shaughnessy.
Yeah.
And then like the Phoenix comes back and like Harry kills the snake.
Yeah.
I'm just there as a child thinking like, "You're welcome, everyone. I saved your boy."
Actually, yo, you should tell that on stage, man. You should, if you set that up right, if you go on stage and like, yeah, I can see that turning into a joke, man.
Yeah, I've been that's been one of my premises. Like, I keep premises written down, and then I inevitably, if it's good enough, I'll add like the punchline and then
I'm the
test
same.
it.
I'm the same. Like, do you use an iPhone?
I've got my Android, but I use like Google Docs and notes
Yeah.
and stuff on it.
So I have like a list of premises as well, which is like half jokes, but like they're jokes that like have a funny setup, but they need that at the
Yeah.
end, and that's what's missing. So, like, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. But
Yeah.
in terms of my final word, man, I think comedy is a very beautiful art form, and the fact that we get to make people laugh, that's like we should never forget that. It's not something to take for granted. Once you lose it, it's hard to get it back. There's comedians that have gotten unpopular, but winning people back after you've pissed them off is really hard. So it's very important for like comedians to just be humble in the sense that know that what you're doing is like for people at the end of the day. So don't be too don't be too caught up in the bullshit. Stay true to yourself. Make sure your audience enjoys your shows. And that is the final word.
Be funny and don't be a dickhead.
Don't be a dickhead, man. Stay humble. That's it.
As Kendrick Lamar and now Nelson once said.
Gang, gang. That's it.
Right. This has been the Hoodcast. Thank you very much, Nelson, for joining us.
It's been a pleasure, man.
We will be back on Sunday for that podcast with Pope Lonergan. So yeah, stay safe, stay hydrated, and stay the fuck inside.
Peace.
Peace.